Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session, Solving Your Top 5 Mobile Workforce Challenges. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items that we'd like to cover. A link with today's session's recording will be made available to everyone. Should you have any questions for our speaker, please submit your question by simply using the chat section of the GoToWebinar console. All questions will be answered during the QA portion of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Matt Fairhurst, CEO and co-founder of Schedulo. Matt brings over 10 years of product and UX experience. Prior to founding Schedulo, Matt held a number of leadership roles in marketing, consulting, and design in the enterprise software and manufacturing sector. Without further ado, here's Matt.
Thanks, Aya, and thank you everyone for being on the call, whether it's the morning or in the afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. I appreciate you having a listen to some of our experiences and our learnings over the last 3 years that we've been working with mobile workforce companies and solving both field service and mobile workforce scheduling and mobility problems within the enterprise. As I said, we've worked with customers quite a bit in the last 3 years across many different industries and verticals, right from healthcare through to cleaning companies and traffic management, security companies, financial services companies. All these organizations have people out in the field that they're scheduling and mobilizing work to achieve the service or the sale or whatever it is that they're delivering in the field. And it's been really interesting to spend time with these customers and these organizations over the last 3 years and really learn and get an understanding of what are the pain points that they face as companies and organizations with this kind of workforce, one that does not sit behind a desk but goes out and does things remotely or in the field and travels from job to job. And there's certainly a flow as an application. We focus on some very distinct parts of that challenge within these organizations, and we integrate really well with enterprise systems like Salesforce, for example, to really close out some of the challenges that we've seen and that I'll describe later on in this webinar. But one of the things that we'll talk quite a bit about today is that first moment of service, and this is that initiating point where either an internal stakeholder or your customer or someone else initiates the demand for work. You could be selling something or servicing something, and that's really that moment where someone picks up the phone and initiates the request for someone in the field to come and do something or be somewhere at a certain point and deliver a service. And it's important that you can solve scheduling and availability understanding problems right in that first moment of service to achieve the best result that you possibly can as soon as you possibly can. And we'll talk a little bit more of that today. Our application then covers a scheduling and assignment challenge where not only do you want visibility and understanding during that first moment of service around when you have the capacity as a business to deliver these services, but also who is best fit in your business compared to others within your organization to do that work. And once that's established, then dispatching that out to the worker, to their mobile applications so they can perform the work in the field, and whether that's taking photos or just updating data or traveling to get there on time or filling out very complex forms. The other side of our application is dedicated to that worker in the field, giving them all the tools they need to get work done. And finally, the end result is hopefully a really happy stakeholder or customer, that person that initiated that service in the beginning, the person that you worked with very closely to give them immediate feedback around the capacity of business to deliver service or planned work ahead of time, making sure that they're really happy with the service that they were delivered, be it in the field or just because of a wonderful immediate experience in that first moment of service. And one thing that we've noticed over the last 3 years working with organizations solving this particular journey and this challenge is, the many problems and challenges that organizations face when they're looking at technology and trying to make a technology decision to improve the way that they deliver service or run their business. And I think the purpose of today's webinar is to really talk to the top 5 things that we've seen as an organization and as a technology company over that period of time, and I guess dive into those in a little bit of detail so that we can all get on the same page and the same level of understanding around the kind of challenges that face us, but also some of the solutions that are out there from a technology perspective as well, and how we're seeing organizations address and solve those challenges. The first one, and probably the anchor to understanding the capacity of your business and solving these problems, is to understand and get a very granular understanding of your team's availability. Understanding people's availability and the time and the capacity they have to dedicate to actual scheduled work. It's a little bit like building a model from the ground up, understanding firstly the people's general availability and understanding that kind of pattern of they're available 9 till 5 or 8 till 4 or 8 till 6 typically during any given day based on the 40-hour week or the 45-hour week that they typically work, for example. And on top of that, then looking at things like scheduled break times and within that day and within that time period of general availability throughout the day, when are they scheduled to have time off? What are then the personal activities that can come in and impact their general availability? So things like going to the doctor or dropping the kids off at school or something like that, they may schedule themselves. What kind of impact does that have on the availability of them as a person and as an individual within your organization to get work done? In and around that, then sort of unscheduled or non-structured work activities like meetings or cleaning their vehicle or stocking their van, for example. What are the various work activities and work appointments that they need to do that consume their capacity to do work that is structured and is scheduled? Then on top of that, understanding the work that they've already been given, the jobs and appointments that have been dispatched. And our application, our product, of course, calculates things like travel time to understand the impact of location on people's time and their ability throughout the day to get work done and when they need to leave one place in order to get to the next job. And ultimately what this gives us is by consolidating this and kind of rolling it up into a flattened pattern of availability, an overarching understanding and a very clear understanding of when people are truly available to work within a company. And some organizations are definitely capable of discovering all of that about their employees. Others, 1099 workers, for example, or contract workers, don't have the level of insight required to get all of that information. So with those, we try and get as close as we can to understanding as much as we can about when someone is available to a business to work. And if we look at all of the various inputs and the technology points that actually feed that story and that first component of our challenge today, there's many disparate systems that kind of feed into this flattened model of availability. And there really is no one system that is the source of truth for this stuff, and rightly so. I mean, things like Google Calendar and Outlook are often used to manage personal activities. Google Maps and various mapping technologies are used to understand traffic time and travel time with traffic considerations, for example. Work activities are sometimes ad hoc, sometimes structured around when people are having meetings. And then general availability can be very simply managed through templates of standard availability hours, or could be quite robust and complex and come out of systems that are structured in their approach to managing rosters and shifts of people's time. And then, of course, managing the actual jobs and appointments is something that Scheduler handles as well and feeds into that map of availability. So as you can see, with all of these systems coming together, this model can get quite complex, and shuffling these things around and trying to make technology decisions to solve that problem of kind of consolidating and getting real-time visibility of people's availability is very difficult. And in this case, this model is designed or visualized for one individual, and you can imagine by stacking sort of 40, 50, 100, 1,000 people and understanding all of their availability, these systems get quite complex, and the challenge of trying to handle that in Excel or Google Calendar or some other disconnected system on whiteboards or piece of paper becomes almost impossible to handle at scale. And that's really the first component and the first challenge that we've seen come up in the organizations that we've worked with. This is an example here of some of the ways that we can surface that information directly and immediately during that first moment of service. And you can see here, this is just an example of a Salesforce opportunity and a sale that's been sold. And here they needed to understand very clearly of the people that were suitable for doing that work, what is their predicted availability and expected availability in sort of 2-hour time slots throughout the next day, and we can see very clearly the capacity of the business to deliver this service that this sale requires across my team. And it's that instant visibility during that first moment of service of the capacity of the business based on the aggregate availability of people making up the team that really helps companies that we work with solve some of these challenges immediately. The next challenge that we've seen is understanding and businesses trying to understand, yep, we've got a model of people's availability and that's great, but then also understanding what are the other criteria and characteristics of people that feed into the rest of the decision-making process. And we're going to go through that now and sort of discover some of those other criteria. Certainly the second part of the challenge, or a second challenge that we see across our businesses is taking that availability and with an understanding of that first moment of service, and then applying a whole bunch of criteria to find the best team member to perform work. And often this can be a very difficult choice. Understanding the availability of people and the capacity of the business is certainly one paradigm here. But once you understand that, then looking at maybe the 4 or 5 or 500 people that are available to do a piece of work at a certain point in time, and saying, well, what are the other criteria and what are the other rules in my organization that I need to understand in order to allocate that piece of work successfully to an individual. And this can get very complex. Some organizations are very flat and it's really just about availability. Maybe they're working in a business unit where practically anyone can do the work that's typically initiated within that department. Or sometimes it can be very complex. In healthcare, for example, we see a lot of complex and multifaceted criteria combined to sort of say, of the 500 people that work in this organization, there's a group of 20 that can really do this job at this particular time based on their availability, and of that 20, there's 5 that have the matching criteria based on that business's and that organization's rules around who can do certain types of work. And these are just some of the examples that we found organizations considering, and certainly we've built technology to accommodate. But availability is obviously one of those things on the list. But drilling down into things like skills and abilities, which of the 20 people that are available to do the work have the skills and abilities required to visit that kind of patient or go and perform that kind of audit. Travel time and proximity we've touched on as well. What is mapping and geolocation and routing technology telling us about where we expect that group of 20 people to be and who is going to be the closest at that point in time. And are they traveling from a job that we've already assigned them to, or will they be traveling from an office or a home location? Factoring those things in is important when it comes to reducing travel time and costs that it takes people to get to a work site. Maybe it's about utilization and the balance of work across those 20 candidates of people. How do we better balance the workload across the team? How do we compromise and say, yep, we acknowledge that we may not get the absolute best person from a skills and ability point of view or a travel time point of view, but for us as a business, it's important that we're balancing the load of work so that we can fit as much in as possible and balance the prioritization of the workforce across the demand for work in the field. Does the group of people and individuals within that group have a history with the customer or the recipient of the work? Do they have a familiarity? And particularly in healthcare, non-profit community services, we see a lot of this where a familiarity with the family or the patient or the record historically is very important to making sure that you as an organization can deliver the best service that you possibly can. Blacklisting and whitelisting, perhaps there's people within that segment of 20 people that the customer has requested specifically not to service them or not work with them, but conversely, maybe there is a small segment that they've said explicitly, this is the only group of people that I can work with in your organization for a whole bunch of different reasons, and one of them might be things like certification or location scoring, with workplace health and safety and workplace induction becoming more complex and robust in the workplace. Often particular work sites require anyone that enters that work site to be inducted on site and go through a training exercise or a workplace health and safety exercise. So looking at only those people that have performed that activity or training, for example. Team member type and category, and this is similar to your utilization and work balancing. Who do we want to prioritize in terms of our full-time versus part-time people in the field versus external third-party contractors, which is cheaper and which is also going to provide the greatest utilization of the people that we care most about getting work in the organization. And then, of course, like any application that works with enterprise and mid-market organizations, we see a lot of custom business rules and bespoke rules across a business. And it was only a few weeks ago that we were talking to an agricultural auditing company where, if a worker had performed an audit or an inspection at a chicken farm, we had to wait 48 hours before they could perform a similar audit and inspection on a cattle farm. And that's a pretty unique rule that, really applies to that industry and to their business in a fairly unique way. But as you can see, the overall complexity of bringing all this together can be quite significant. And, organizations often struggle to conceptualize not only availability and provide that real-time view of when people are available, but combine that very deliberately with business rules and drivers that, make sense across that criteria. Then organizations that we've worked with and we've seen certainly have the decision that they have to go through to say, well, as a company, what's important to us as we start to make scheduling and assignment decisions? And some of those criteria are going to lend themselves more to customer drivers, things like whitelisting and blacklisting, or customer preference, or account history, skills and abilities, certifications. Some of that is more about being as responsive and as appropriate as we can be to the customer's interests and the customer's drivers versus business drivers, for example. Reducing travel time or maximizing utilization is an example of where some organizations choose to swing the opposite way and drive for absolute efficiency or absolute optimization, so that the cost of their workforce and the cost of their service delivery is being driven down as much as possible. And where you sit on that sliding scale, on that spectrum, is very important for businesses to consider. How do you adopt technology to facilitate where you sit on that spectrum? Sometimes organizations, in a call center, for example, where they're scheduling people to come out into a home or go out into a business, prefer to automate the process. And certainly when it comes to business drivers, like calculating the most efficient route for 20 people to visit these 50 jobs and that kind of thing, there are ways that can be automated, and there's technology that can be used to automate those processes and automate those decisions as a job comes in. We've got some fantastic customers all over the world that have built really impressive systems to, take a device alert off a piece of machinery, for example, and without any human touch, dispatch it out to the right technician based on automating some of those business drivers and business rules, which is pretty impressive. Others, though, prefer and are more suited to a user experience in a call center that really visualizes this information. And just like we were sort of visualizing people's availability, making sure that you can factor in these various business rules to give them a very clear presentation of who's available and who is the most sorted or preferential to schedule and assign out to this piece of work, either depending on business drivers or customer drivers. And I think that paradigm is very important to consider when you're thinking about the other criteria other than simple availability or complex availability as it comes to scheduling and assigning your workforce in the field. I think the third thing that we regularly see is that scheduling is not an isolated process in the business. It's certainly not disconnected, or it shouldn't be disconnected from that initiating business process. But often when we talk to customers and we talk to organizations and we sort of see that, to no fault of their own, other than technology hasn't been available to them, for maybe 10 years they've been using Excel or pieces of paper or whiteboard to really figure out how to connect that first moment of service to a scheduling process. And something we often see is that departments and organizations or business units within a company start to spring up just dedicated to scheduling a mobile workforce. And often part of that fragmentation and isolation of a scheduling process can lead to the thought process and all of the decision making that goes into finding the right person a bit of a black box. And if we think about that first moment of service and the demand for work, whether it's coming from a customer because you're doing a recurring visitation in a home, or a recurring service on a piece of machinery, or you've sold something, you've sold a solar panel that needs to be installed, or you've sold an audit or an inspection, or a pre-sales home inspection, for example, or you're responding to an immediate service request from a customer. Something's broken, or someone is ill and you need to go and respond to them in the home. That's the initiating first moment of service. That's the demand within your organization to actually mobilize your workforce. And if people that are performing and responding to within the capacity of that first moment of service are then sort of passing it over to this black box department to say, hey, here's my need, and these are the various kind of paradigms behind that need. Tell me when I have someone available to go and do this, do this service or do this thing. Sometimes we've seen hours or days later a response coming back, sort of based on consolidating all of this activity and opening up Google Maps and calculating travel time manually, and then plugging that into Excel and figuring out all these other paradigms on pivot tables. And again, sort of due to not knowing that there was technology available to them, are sort of building teams of huge amounts of domain knowledge in a couple of individuals' head around who are the right people to schedule to the various kind of work that's coming through. So part of our sort of, I guess, challenge that we work with and that we present to customers and present through our technology is how do we create a very clear line of sight right from the field and that mobile worker in the field all the way through to those individuals within the company that are working and responding to that first moment of service. How do you provide real-time insights or even immediate results from selling something and actually scheduling and assigning someone because you know precisely when they're going to be available, and communicating that to your customer or your stakeholder immediately? How do you cross that bridge and make sure that you're providing that full breadth of insight, and there is no black box department that looks after scheduling, or black box person that can never leave the company and never go on holidays because they're the only person within the business that can actually answer those questions for any of these departments or customers. And I think this is a really big challenge within modern companies that base their ability to deliver business and deliver service on people in the field, and this is a huge challenge. And again, some of the ways that we can help, and we have helped customers do that, is by surfacing these decisions directly within their system of record. Connecting technology that's used to manage that first moment of service. So is it CRM or an ERP process or an invoice or a case, for example, in some system? How do you embed and surface immediate capacity information about the availability but also suitability of people within the business directly within the context of that record? So you're not rekeying and double entering information just to get to a decision point of saying, yes, we have availability on Tuesday at 9 a.m. As a business, and we know that the people behind that capacity have the skills and abilities and all the business rules required to do that component of work. So connecting those two and providing immediate insight right at the moment of service is incredibly critical. I think fourthly, really thinking about what people are actually doing in the field. So it's one thing to think about scheduling and assigning work, and certainly that's a really big challenge within organizations today. But then subsequently thinking about how the workforce actually deals with that information. Once a job has been dispatched or an appointment's been assigned to someone, what do they actually do with that? Do they pick up a clipboard and say, yep, I'll come and report back to you at the end of the day or the end of the week with all of the outcomes of this work? Or do we give them the appropriate technology and the appropriate tools that are now, these days, certainly readily available on smartphones to actually really perform that work in the field? And do they have everything at their fingertips to execute their job and provide the business, subsequently real-time insights into what they're doing? And not only is a reduction of paper, obviously wonderful for the environment, it becomes hugely efficient for a workforce, not having to carry around a clipboard and paper that can get lost and discarded. And we've again sort of seen organizations with stacks of paper or rooms of filing cabinets to sort of drive very unstructured paper collection of information and results in the field. So we've already established the when and the why and the who of the individuals that are going to perform this work through that first moment of service, and providing scheduling insight and either automating that or providing great visualization to do so, great technology. But looking at the breakdown of what people do on a mobile device when they're starting to solve these challenges is looking at, what are the kind of table stakes or the universal functions available with technology today to start thinking about, some of the interesting functions, but also data that you can get from a mobile device. And of course, being able to synchronize it with their calendar and looking at an agenda of their day and figuring out or instantly recognizing what they've got to do on any given day or any given week or month is important. Being able to submit and manage their own availability, so communicating back to the business in real time and feeding back, things like those workplace activities. I'm in a meeting, or I'm washing my car, or I'm replenishing my van, or something like that. What are those other ad hoc activities that happen in the field that will impact their future availability, making sure that we can enter those appropriately. Travel time and navigation, making sure that we have a mutual understanding from the back office right to the front office on a mobile device, what the expected travel time is from their current location, but also where we expect them to be in the future, so they can prepare appropriately to get there on time. And then allowing them to navigate in real time and follow turn-by-turn directions to get to the workplace. Time tracking, of course, and recognizing all of those moments within a mobile workforce's day and a mobile team member's day that you want to track as a business. How much time are they spending traveling? How much time are they spending with customers? How much time are they spending filling out data and completing checklists and providing the business with the information they need to run? Of course, job and appointment information. Where have they got to go? Who have they got to see? What's the important information that's critical to them delivering that service? And then, some of the nicer things that you can do on mobile devices these days, like capturing a signature from the customer or a stakeholder, looking at attachments and documents and taking photos in the field of things that are broken or issues that might have come up. And of course, there's a social collaboration layer over it these days as well that allow, into the worker communication or worker to office communication or even worker to customer communication in some cases. But I think on top of that, then businesses have very specific information that's important to them in a less general sense, and specific to, say, a financial services organization that might be doing insurance audits or inspections of a home or a vehicle or an asset of some kind. That's very different to someone going and installing something or fixing something and needing to pick parts and materials, that should sync back to their ERP, for example. Checklists and surveys, maybe in a retail or a field marketing kind of capacity, patient forms and patient data in a healthcare setting, training and attendance forms and incident reports for a workplace health and safety point of view. But, I think we've seen a lot of variation around the kind of data that's important to capture when you're working through jobs in the field across many, many different industries. And this is just an example of what some of those can look like. Obviously on the left-hand side, getting critical job information and presenting that to the user in real time, presenting things like training session roll calls, or on the right-hand side, things like pest inspection audits, or different types of data entry to make sure that you're following a typical critical path to deliver a certain type of service in the field. So once we've actually completed that journey, we've gone through that first moment of service, we've looked at their availability, we've managed to find the most appropriate person based on either customer drivers or business drivers. We've gotten that work out into the field and dispatched it to a mobile application that's allowed us to collect a whole volume of information and data. It's important to remember that that function is not ever certainly in my experience, disconnected from the rest of the business. Scheduling and then the data that's collected in the field is very, very rarely isolated from what's actually happening in the rest of the organization, whether it be CRM or ERP or that service management component, or people selling something and needing information back from the field, or maybe it's just an internal operation. Did you go and install that piece of IT equipment correctly and show me a photo of it installed on the rack, for example? So all of this, whether it's that first moment of service or all the data that you're collecting in the field, it's imperative that it's connected to the rest of the organization. And certainly, in our case, we work with partners like Salesforce and other systems of record to make sure that critical business systems like scheduling and mobility are connected right into other areas of the business. What you can do with that is start to then analyze that data in real time and start to look at interesting metrics that can help improve and perform all of these activities over time. Looking at things like travel time or the time spent doing certain activities, or what's the demand for certain skill sets and skill and criteria across my business. Who are the customers that are demanding more work versus other customers that maybe demand less? All of that availability becomes extremely interactive and accessible by implementing a mobile workforce solution like Scheduler and integrating it very closely with your system of record. So hopefully that gave you a really interesting summary of some of the challenges that we've identified over the last 3 years working with customers. We love working in this space, and I think it's an incredibly interesting and a rapidly changing space of technology. And I think the world of field service generally is changing. Organizations are adopting technology across the board. Companies that are, and businesses that have sent people in the field to do certain types of work for decades are now realizing that everyone has a smartphone in their hand. And we're always very excited to learn more about the specific challenges that they face. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a snapshot into the top 5 that we see and then we consider very important to not only the pain within organizations and what they're experiencing, but also some of the ways that we and other technologies help to solve those pain points within an organization.